Today I wanted to make a converter to change JSON string to a readable format. So I've started by setting up this raw object, which is just a basic JavaScript object which contains some information. You can see it just contains a couple of numbers assigned to A, B, C as an array, and there's an object in that array as well. A few strings, and we've got some strings with a few different things in. So this one has speech marks in and apostrophes as well, and that's going to be important a little later on. But essentially what I want to do is, when it comes out as a string, I want to be able to save it to essentially a file eventually, and then I'll be able to read it from a file and just convert it back to an object. But when it's in the file, I want it so it's easy to read. Whereas normally if we just do this JSON stringify, it just comes out in one straight line, everything on the same line. I just want to split it up so it's got all the indentations and a nicer structure. So I'm going to start off by making a function, convert JSON string to readable. I'm just going to capitalize that S. And I'm just going to pass it in the string. So JSON string. And right now I'm just going to return the actual JSON string. And I'm just going to console.log everything here, and you can see that the JSON string is actually set to this raw object stringified. I'm just going to print out the raw object first because we're going to do this in the web browser to test it. I've just built a very basic JavaScript IDE just so we can run everything straight away. And yeah, I'm just going to run this, copy, paste it into the editor. And I've already got an error because it's equals function. And we shouldn't have an error now. So we can see that was the basic object. That's the string that it comes out originally, and now I want to make the function actually change this string into a readable string. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to first of all loop through the JSON string each character. So I'm going to go let I equals 0, I is less than the string dot length, because that's the number of characters, I plus plus, just to increment on a loop. Now the way we've got to do this is we've got to store the information in another variable, so I'm just going to call it string. I'm just going to set it to empty. Now I've got to check I'm going to check this string, because when we actually do something like this here with a comma in the data, because it stores an attribute and a value, if it's in the attribute and the value, it obviously can't just leave speech marks around it, so it has to cancel them out using this backslash before them. So I'm going to look for the backslash first, and when there is a backslash, I'm just going to basically jump over that character. So if JSON string .I for the character that I'm checking, so I'm going to go through the start of the string to the end of the string, and if it equals backslash, and I'm going to do 2 backslashes because the first one just tells it that I'm actually just looking for the backslash itself. I'm not using it as I'm not using the backslash as a function. So now we've got this, we can just write to the string plus equals the JSON string, which I'll just write the backslash first, and then I'm going to jump over it by doing I++, and then we're going to do it again. And what this is going to do is increment the loop without actually jumping through the loop. And it's going to get the next character, which would be the one that we're going to jump over when we do the next check. So now I've done this, I need to check whether we're actually dealing with an attribute or whether we're dealing with a structure around the attributes and values. So I'm going to do outside the loop, I'm going to put a let is attribute, or I'm just going to shorten it to attrib and val, and we're going to set it to false because originally when you start it, it's always the structure before we actually reach an attribute. So we're going to start with this. So and we'll deal with that in a second. So we'll do is attribute true. So when it's true, we're going to do this, what I'm going to put in here. So when it is an attribute, I'm just going to write it straight out. So it's just going to be this line. And when it's not an attribute, we're going to do something a bit trickier, which is I'm just going to put a switch statement in first. And the switch statement is just going to take the current character we're working with. Now I'm just going to type case and then whatever character I'm going to work with. So I'm just going to use apostrophes and a speech mark inside the apostrophes, which just means I'm checking for the character of a speech mark. And I'm going to break just so I don't forget later. And when we've got a speech mark, I've just got to convert this to is attribute value, and I'm going to just flip it to whatever the opposite of it is, which is going to mean I've got to do is attribute value equals false, and this is just a way of flipping a true or false statement to actually being its opposite. And when that is the case, I believe I've also got to write JSON to string as well. So if I send back the string at this point, we should be able to get some information. I need to make sure the flip is in here as well. So if JSON string equals apostrophe speech marks, then I'm going to flip this again, just so it's on this branch as well. And we can also put a default case in, and in this default case I'm just going to add the current character to the string. So there's going to be a few things missing. Oh no, everything should be in there at the moment, you just won't have the right structure. And as we can see, I believe that is on, I believe it's running there. So as you can see, it is outputting the right values. It's identical to the start, so we are on the right track at least. Now we've got to do the actual indenting, which means I've got to go case, and we're just going to start by using the open bracket, and because I'm also going to use the box bracket as well, I'm just going to put this directly underneath it, and I'm just going to put break after this, which means I also do need to put a string here. But now we need to count the indents at the same time. So let indent equal 0, so 0 indents. and when we run this we want to make sure that we know the exact amount of indents that there is. Actually, we'll do it as an indent string. That makes a little more sense. So before we do this plus string, we then actually have to indent the string. So plus equals \t. So every time we see an open bracket or a open box bracket, what we're going to actually add a tab in, so every time it gets a bit longer. So first of all, for this we need to do a \r\n. So when we see an open bracket, we're going to add a new line, and we're going to add an indent, and we're going to add the JSON string, and we might add another \r\n plus another indent, and that should start us off with the next attribute. And that should be okay. I'm thinking we also need to do something similar to this with the comma, because when you get a comma it just means you're at the end of a statement, which means we're also going to do the same thing except without the plus \t, and we also want to do the case for the close brackets, which means we're going to use an open bracket as well. The breaking, and this time we're going to do the same thing, but the indent we're just going to do a dot sub str1, and that's just going to remove one of the \t's from the equation. So this is going to be problematic with the comma, but we can solve that, and it should be okay. Right, so I need to put indent equals, obviously, because we're changing the indent. And now we already have something that looks a little bit more familiar. And I think I've done the open bracket slightly wrong, because I've done the indenting first, which means I should have done this before. String plus equals. And now when we do the indenting afterwards, it should be at the right level. Which means we've already got something that looks pretty close. The only problem now is we've got this comma that is not working the way it should be. So we're going to do a while loop, and we're just going to pop off the last element of the string, and we're actually going to check that last element of the string. So we're going to do string.length -1, because the element is always one less than the actual length, and we're going to check if that's equal to a \t, and I'm also going to do this again with an OR statement, because I also want to check if it is a \n. So while that's true, now we need to change the string just slightly. So string should equal string.substring, and we want to pop off the last element of the string. I'm just going to do that by using the string length, and then I'm going to subtract 2 from it, so it gives you the, so this is taking a sample of the string starting at character 0, and we're going to end it one less than the number of characters. So it should leave us with everything but the last character. And then we can just add this straight onto it. And I won't need to, we don't need to do a new line, so I'm going to add this straight onto the end of the line itself. The reason I'm not putting this \r into this statement here, that's just simply because when we get to the \r, it will already be running this, so it will just remove it. Now it just seems like we've got this opening clause, and that just seems just very slightly off because we've got one extra \r\n statements. Checking, and if we just take it off the start, it should now visit the opening statement. Hold on. It's the opening statement, so we've got an extra \r\n here, which we don't need. So we can just apply the indent, add the indent to it, and then do what we need to. \r\n. Right, so we've got to do this a slightly different way. If the last character is a string JSON -1 equals \t, we know it's already indented, else we can do something else. And what I actually want to do is add this in with the JSON.string here, and we're going to take out the indent. I'm just going to leave the \r\n, and we're just going to leave the indent down here. And if it's not a \t, we want to do an enter. So this would be essentially if it's after a colon, we want to do \r\n. Then we want to do an indent. Because that would be still the previous, and then after it's done the indent, we can just append it to both of these lines. And it should be fine. So let's try this now. As we can see, it looks perfectly normal, but now can we convert this back into what we expected to see in the first place, which was just this object here? Can we convert it back to it? So let's just store the return value of this temporarily. So I'm just going to put it readable text. And so I'm still going to print it out, but this time I'm going to do JSON.parse readable text. Play the console. run, and as we can see, still producing the same results, but it's looking a lot more readable. And for most people this won't actually matter at all. This is just if you're storing it to, let's say, every time your site loads it's got to read a JSON file, but you want to make sure that the JSON file is in a format that's easily editable. So let's say you've got all this server information or any other bits of information, you want to make it editable. Well, having something like this can make it a lot easier to just go through line by line and select what data you actually want to change. It just makes it slightly easier and slightly more usable. But obviously, if you're storing things for efficiency, this is the way you would actually go. And thank you for watching.